This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 815 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, sponsored by FanDuel. Thanks for tuning in. Before getting into the trends this week, I just want to remind you guys about the Late Round Fantasy Football Patreon. The Patreon has live stream Q&As with yours truly, weekly rankings and tiers, rest of season rankings and tiers, and so much more. You can learn more about it over on lateround.com. Trend 1 this week is about Rhamondre Stevenson. I thought he was a buy candidate a couple of weeks ago when Ezekiel Elliott started stealing more work from him, because Stevenson's general snap share and workload didn't really suffer that much. But clearly that was wrong advice. Give me the L. Now, I wasn't overly high or low on Stevenson entering the year, but I definitely didn't expect this. And it's not just an Ezekiel Elliott thing. His targets per route run rate has been cut by about 40%. His rate of giving us explosive plays has dropped. His target share per game rate was over 17% last year. It's only 10% this year. Now, if you want some hope, New England's faced a pretty rough schedule to start the year. From here on out, according to my adjusted fantasy points allowed numbers, Patriot running backs have a top 10 schedule. So hopefully that can get Stevenson back on track. Though I don't expect him to come close to his 2022 numbers, especially as a receiver, which is really why you drafted Stevenson in the first place. According to FantasyLife.com, the Chicago Bears this year have a dropbacks over expected rate of 0%, which means they've thrown the ball from a volume perspective at expectation. They're also 19th in neutral script pass rate, or their rate of throwing the ball when games are within 6 points. This has led to more passing volume in the offense. Last season, Chicago was dead last in neutral script pass rate. They averaged just a little over 22 pass attempts per game. This year, that number's over 8 pass attempts higher. One of the strangest things this season, at least from the standpoint of what we expected entering the year to what's actually happening, one of the strangest things is that Chicago currently has 11 passing touchdowns to 2 rushing touchdowns. They have the 7th highest pass to rush touchdown rate in football. Now, their pass rate may be higher than last year, but that pass to rush touchdown rate, that's bound to regress, which could mean good things for someone like Roschon Johnson moving forward. But it's been a wild ride this year for that offense. Christian Watson was so close to a big game in week 5. His box score looked okay enough because he did make one big play, but Watson finished the week with a 24% target share and the second most air yards in the NFL behind only George Pickens. The Packers still lead the NFL in air yards per attempt too, so better days should be ahead for him. I'd consider him more of a buy than a sell. The New York Giants offense is such a dumpster fire. They rank 31st in air yards per attempt. They're tied for last in total touchdowns this year with just 5. And as I said in the 15 Transactions show, they haven't scored an offensive touchdown in 3 of 5 games. They rank 31st in pressure rate allowed. They're 32nd in sack rate allowed. They're 27th in rushing yards over expected per rush. This is your friendly reminder to stream defenses against the New York Giants. Things continue to trend in the wrong direction for Alexander Mattison. He's still been productive enough in fantasy. Last week he scored through the air. But he saw his snap share drop to just 51% this past week. From weeks 1 to 3, he averaged about a 75% snap rate. Over the last 2 weeks with the Vikings using more Cam Akers, that snap share has gone down to 69% and then 51% this week. This might be what we see moving forward. More of a 50 to 60% snap share. But I still think throwing a dart at Cam Akers, using a bench player to get Cam Akers, it's not the worst idea in the world. It's a trend show, so I've got to bring up Breece Hall after his Week 5 performance. Yes, I know it was the Broncos, but Hall saw his highest snap share of the season at 52%. He saw by far his highest running back rush share of 76%. He had a season-high 11.5% target share too. Robert Saleh said that Hall wouldn't be limited, and while they're still using more Michael Carter than I'd like, we saw how effective Hall can be in a plus matchup. He's just a great running back. The Chiefs seem adamant about rotating their wide receivers, but their best wide receiver this year has clearly been Rashee Rice. His yards per route run of 2.79 is best on the team by 0.6, And the only other wide receiver with a mark above 2 is Justin Watson. Rice also has the highest targets per route run rate in all of football among players with 50 or more routes run. Now, I know that they're openly telling us that there's going to be a rotation there, but I'm having a very hard time just accepting that as truth. Rice is a raw prospect, but he's doing well, and they're giving him the ball when he's on the field. It's hard for me to drop a player like that. As everyone knows, Cooper Kupp returned for the Rams in Week 5. With Kupp, the Rams ended up running 100% of their offensive plays out of 11 personnel. That's according to Next Gen Stats. That's a 3 wide receiver set, and it's also a Sean McVay special. The Rams are first in the league in 11 personnel usage entering the week at a 92% rate. But the fact that it was even heavier, even higher, that's good news for Tutu Atwell, because Atwell played as the team's number 3 wideout with an 89% snap share. He's the third option in that offense, but he still saw a 15% target share despite 2 wide receivers being ahead of him. And he has upside if something happens to either Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua. There's plenty of reason to keep him on your roster despite a 2-catch performance. Derrick Henry saw a season-low 65% running back rush share in Week 5. He's now been below a 10% target share in all but one game this year. He's ranked as a top 10 running back in PPR formats just once. It hasn't been a completely miserable experience if you have Derrick Henry, but it also hasn't been great. But if you want some optimism thrown your way, which I'm sure you do, I think Henry's more of a hold despite these peripherals. Moving forward from now through the rest of the year, Tennessee running backs have the 4th best schedule by adjusted fantasy points allowed. And we want positive game scripts. That's going to help Derrick Henry. And after this week against Baltimore, they get the Falcons at home, and then they're on the road against the Steelers and then the Buccaneers. Those aren't difficult matchups. And in the fantasy playoffs, Henry's going to get Houston, Seattle, and then Houston again. So I wouldn't give up on Derrick Henry just yet. The last trend this week is about James Cook. Things were really looking good for Cook after Week 1. He saw 80% of the team's running back rushes. But since that point in time, he's hit a max single-game running back rush share of 60%. And I've seen people panicking. And I get it. He doesn't have the most ideal role in the world. But I would still relax a little bit. His snap share in Week 5 was the highest that we've seen all year. And his route participation was also highest. He's now hit about a 10% target share in 4 or 5 games this year. He's going to be more valuable in a role where he's used more like Alvin Kamara than some early down bruiser. So hopefully the Bills lean into that. Right now, James Cook is a hold. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you've yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter @LateRoundQB. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'll talk to you tomorrow with the weekly Sleeper Show.